Okay, I wasn't originally going to make a video, I guess, but so now I am going to make one. And, I probably should have messed with the quality settings so it doesn't accidentally make such a huge file size. But look, I like the shape, I like the clouds. I like them. They're so cute. All right. So what I was thinking is, I guess a lot of the stuff I do or have done on my channel just all seem to be thought experiments and weird reactions to real-time events as I've seen them, either written from AI article writers or actual article writers that are as socially tone deaf as AI. Meaning I can't tell the difference at this point. But yeah, it's like, okay, at some point it's like, okay, are humans capable of lying? Yes. Because I can say, that's 50,000 miles away. And it's like, I mean, unless you were like a nano being, like not even a micro organism construction, atomic being walking around and stuff, right? If you were not even constructed atomically or subatomically, but something like a secret third thing where it's like somehow you're constructed on even less, I guess, tensile strength, which would make you more stretchy. I'm getting too far with it. Obviously, we can deduce it did not take me that long. Because if you assume that I can't violate the medium I'm in, whether it be the false vacuum of space or the false vacuum of space but heavier, or the false vacuum of space but even heavier, right? Meaning the viscosity, the viscousness of the atmosphere. Because I'm like, if you consider, it's like I'm actually breathing in bits of traces of water vapor all the time, and this is proof right here that it exists, right? Water vapor. And it's when it gets heavy enough, like super heavy water vapor, there's this thing called rain that occurs, right? So that's why I'm just delineating them based off pressurizations of falseness of vacuum, right? Rather than even referring to chemical compositions and this and that and the other. So yeah, technically I'm breathing in the medium because it can be assumed that I'm a human. I mean, I'm not like, I could be something else, but right now I guess I'm a human for, as long as I think I've lived so far, right? So we can do the calculations and be like, well, damn, it actually really didn't take you that long. Like you would have had to violate space-time so much, and you would probably not even look the same way if you moved this fast. Like, you know how they just for your lie to have not been a lie there, right? So you can tell I'm lying. Yes, humans are capable of lying. Now, is that on purpose or not? Like, that's a whole different story. But we're not looking for purpose really in this. What I'm talking about. Sorry, there's something I was trying to say there, but I thought of not saying. This is why I need to use the pause button more. But okay, basically, my whole point is, I would not have been alive if I'm what we deduce as a human, going that speed and looking at all these relativistic effects. That would suggest the topography of my universe is such that I'm either a giant or all this is really small, or some other visual effect is going on in between them, or that I just paused the video and I replayed it each time and it really took that long and I just sliced it down into whatever 3 minutes had been until I walked to it, right? Well, because I have a counter on here that, obviously a viewer couldn't see. So it's like I'm basically this higher dimensional being using a two-dimensional device, right? The phone, using a two-dimensional device, because it can't escape. It's not like it exists in 3D, but the screen isn't 3D. The screen doesn't go beyond this. There's no like third dimensionality to the screen. I guess that would be a hologram at that point, right? Holographic phones or this or that or whatever. Okay, I've strayed too far from the point. Are humans capable of lying? Yes. Does that denote sentience or lack of sentience? It's like at this point, it's hard to say. Because it's like, granted, well, I don't know about any other entity or any other individual or being or this or that. Like, I don't know about my mom or my dad, but I tend to think, messing up is a part of learning. So even if you lie, whether the intention was good or not, you do extract information out of the outcome, right? Our ability to observe. I believe it's our ability to observe that gives us free will, and our free will lets us lie, right? We're not, like, that's not an incapability of us, right? So I'm thinking, okay, a lot of my work, I guess, not work, but, well, it's mechanical work. I'm talking through my mouth, and I need ATP, right? Theoretically. I say theoretically because until some other system, I could think of some other system, but it doesn't do me any good if I'm currently operating off ATP, right? So, you see where I'm going with that? So, what I realized, perhaps maybe John Wheeler should have realized this sooner, is, and definitely downsizing from I guess, what would I call it? Not library, or just the repertoire of all of what I can consume, right? By cutting meat out, I realized that if this environment that I'm in does not serve plant needs as much, like, if I happen to be in a state or in an environment where, I can't grow crops as efficiently or whatever for myself, this is what any sentient system must realize if it has free will at all. Like, a primate, for example. It's like, wait a second, I need me have canine because this. If I really wanted so hard to express my own sentience in this deceptively closed system of the universe, because we don't know the bounds of it, right? Unless we can see it for ourselves. This is what I'm going to get into later. Then I need to actually be way smarter, because now I have a certain set of actions or words I can mechanically do before I perish. Just like fruits or vegetables that are planted may perish. Farmer stuff, right? Crops, harvest, all these seasons, you have to be able to tell the weather, this and that and the other, right? Like, nowadays you can grow things in your house, I guess, if your house is sophisticated enough to just like have like all around conditions, and you have enough electricity or enough power generation to keep the plants and the veggies happy, I guess. But it's always just been easier just doing it with open land, right? And then just letting the weather do the rest, right? So, but I'm taking this a step further. I'm saying, okay, what if my stuff's all generally hypothetical on my channel? It's like, okay, what if I'm just John tittering this stuff, and I'm just talking back to myself in space-time, and I'm just relying on the fact that Google and whatever other systems don't go out of style, and therefore my records or archives are not lost, right? Just the free will and the allowance of free will by other systems, saying, oh, well, I guess people get to have free will, right? So, okay. So that's what I'm saying. At a certain point, if you embrace the idea of the numbers of infinities, right? And you're like, well, I guess, at some point the universe could be mirrored in any direction. I would eventually see a clone of myself doing the exact same thing. But you would have to realize, like I said, I could also say, oh, this little pond right here is like 2 feet away, and it's like you would see that this is not true, right? Unless my feet were so small that you'd be like, oh, well, clearly this is not the measurement that you're referring to. You must either have like bigger or smaller feet or whatever. Your cubits must be different from whatever our cubits are, right? You must be a bigger or smaller person. If you had me believe that you weren't lying about this being 2 feet away now. So all you would be able to tell about anything at all is movement through space-time. And you'd have to realize, well, okay, how likely is it for me to see something like me that I might mistake for a clone of myself sooner than I would actually see my actual, like, real bona fide, like, I've traveled light years, I've literally seen like another Earth, and I'm like, just like the shadow there, I'm walking up to myself and I'm like, as expected, right? How many times am I gonna see something I think is that case before it actually becomes that case? And this is basically what quantum physics tries, I wouldn't say tries to fix, it tries to embrace, I guess, saying, okay, well, it seems like we had to talk in likelihoods versus the exception, right? So this is I like how it took me like basically 12 minutes almost just to get to my point of what I'm going to talk about. So the question is, am I an interstellar or intrastellar dick? Meaning, if there's even the slightest chance that you're in a simulation, and just say, okay, like, I mean, there's people moving, but you can say, oh, well, I've been here, like, you can just explain that away in your own mind. If you're really solipsist about it, you could be like, well, I've been here and I've done that and this and that and the other. Like, this is literally me. Like, if you're just so solipsist about it, okay, go ahead, fine. But you would be like, well, what would I do with all the time? And would I have possibly simulated myself? If I don't accept that other people could ever simulate me, but would I, like, I would have to think, would people simulate me that are me? Like, could I simulate myself? And it's like, well, you could ever only simulate a younger version of yourself, I think. Unless you start making clones of yourself and start, like, accelerating their age, like giving them cancer. And it's like, okay, at that point, you're just making other sentiences that are like you, but not you, because you're diverging them in the same way that the human genome diverges. And we have, like, there are already, like, genetically, there are only so many expressions in the human genome, right? So it's like the more and more people born, there's more and more they're going to look like their doppelgangers. And it starts to mimic this universal effect of, oh, you travel light years away. You see things that you think look like a clone of you, which could just be very well be other humans, right, on this planet. And it's like, at some point, you can't distinguish from a simulation and of your own making and your own. I call it like being an accidental God, right? Like, if you're like, well, God doesn't exist, otherwise he'd strike me down right now. And then it's like it continues to exist. Like the atomic clock. Tick, 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 tick. And then you're like, okay, well then I challenged that, right? You know? So then you have to think, well, and if, granted, I've failed all the way up until this point, like, you know, I haven't done always the right thing, right? I don't know if anyone's can ever say that, can ever have said that. But it just seems like there's a certain amount of failure, because it's like, I know if I walk in there and go underneath and breathe underwater, or try to, I'm literally probably going to drown, right? Unless some cosmic event just, like, forces that not to happen. So there's some level of acceptable failure and unacceptable failure. There seems to be, based on your own intuition and what you've heard. Because if what you've heard is simulated, and you're just simulating at least your past, or at least an exact clone of yourself, then you've heard this before. You're literally just telling yourself information. And it's like, okay, well, then you can think of a system where you purposely make yourself forget because you realize that there's a limit to your knowledge, and you want to restart the game, but not really restart the game, right? You don't want to die, but you just kind of want to give yourself either a time skip and let events play out, or just kind of just dumb yourself down a bit and just like wait and have the other sentiences just do whatever in the system, even if they are clones or simulations, right? And this is, yeah, like I said, the idea of the accidental God. And it's like, it literally could have been yourself from a different time space. And you would have no way of knowing if you were like sadistic, if you were a dick to yourself. And so, hypothetical thought experiment. Assume, for the sake of argument, one-to-one cloning is biologically possible, which I believe it is. Like, I don't see how that's physically impossible. If anything, the fact that people have stunt doubles at all says that, yeah, on some form, like naturally, if you assume everything's naturalism, I guess, there are already semi-clones, right? So it would just be like 1 to 0.5, right? And it's like, well, if you could just bump that number up, right? It's like, yeah. So eventually, I don't see how this is not possible. Okay. 2, any version of me. I don't know why I said carriers. Carries is what I literally should have said. Carries core basic traits. Any version of me carries core basic traits. So if you in your life, you're like, well, I had this inclination always in my head, or I always thought this kind of way. And it's like, basically, if I accepted the premises of 1 right off the bat, then that's a part of my mindset, because how did I write it right now, huh? You know what I'm saying? So they have these core basic traits. I can only simulate what I've seen. You know how, like, when they say, like, oh, you can only dream of things you've seen, right? Or a subset of that, right? And it's like, true. Your brain can't like randomly generate things it has not come across. Meaning there's some core basicness of being able to observe and being able to move and being able to like mechanically like waste energy on purpose that is encoded in like the universe, I guess, or the allowance of it accidentally, if that even. Okay. 3, I have no impetus, motivation, or will to help myself. If I'm the original, like, accidental God of, like I could have just callously just, simulated an entire thing to understand the likelihood of my existence, or the likelihood of things going on in the past, or just to, my favorite franchise, Halo. In Halo 3 and Halo Reach, they have this system. If any version of me or any actual real entity, meaning any just normal person out there that comes across this that's not me, yeah, the reason I'm doing this is because I'm trying to protect it from the wind, so the video doesn't come out like because the wind. I know it's kind of like not giving a good visual. This is what I kind of want to fix in later videos, but I digress. Okay. Halo Theater doesn't actually play back a version of events. It actually just plays back all the actions that have been done in the engine that talk to like the server and back, right? If that makes sense. I'm just condensing it. Basically, all it does is that's why some early I don't know if anyone knows who like Achievement Hunter is or any of that, but the fails of the week. I don't know if that rings a bell for anyone. But like some things would be inaccurate. Like 2 people playing in different houses across a country or a nation state would literally have slight differences that can be discerned by observers. So you could have someone come over to someone else's house and be like, yeah, this looks different. And I remember a time like that where it's like, oh, and they explain it, and they're like, well, because it's actually just playing back the game, the match. It's not actually playing it back from your perspective, right? So I started to think of it like doing an MMO, like Star Citizen. It's like, well, what if you had a theater for an MMO using the same logic of what was been played back in the server, right? You could do this by having all your logs, right? And all the data. You could literally play back everyone's actions. And indeed, like in World of Warcraft, they do like roll back people's characters after an event has occurred if they request it. So I'm saying, how does this not mimic what eventually we would, under known physics, be able to replicate in a simulation, if nothing else, right? And it's like, I'm just taking it to the extreme, because I like taking hypotheticals to extremes, just for food of thought, for if no one else, myself in the future, right? So, so for this, I have no impetus, motivation, or will to help myself. Meaning, I just not that I'm evil or sadistic necessarily, even though that's just where I generated this idea. It's like, well, I've had a few thoughts here and there. And it's like, slap a person. What do they say? They're like, oh, mosquitoes will stop sucking when you slap them. I don't. And it's like, I could see how someone can take slapping as sadistic, but whatever. I don't. Let's just remove the sadistic part. That was just me. Sorry. I have no motivation or will to help myself, meaning I'm accidentally callous. Okay. 4. Quantum erasure is a reality only known by myself. So it's like the second I would figure this out, I would make it impossible. Like, I would just be a dick to myself by never simulating me growing up, therefore never gaining this ability to ever escape the simulation. So I would, quantum erasure can be figured out by a past version of myself, but if I'm never allowed to have enough resources in the system to actually ever grow up or get out of it, then it's only known by me and my future self that simulated this, right? It's a very intricate thought experiment. So basically no one would believe me, right? Because if I have the ability to steal information from myself at a constant moment per moment basis due to my own whims, like this is basically meaning like I'm sadistic again. I'm saying I guess there's two versions. I'm purposely doing this to myself, or I accidentally have done this to myself in this thought experiment. I switch back between the two because it's like, I guess people could take it either way, really. So it's like I could be purposely erasing information to make other people not believe me at certain points in time, just so I could keep a younger version of myself in perpetual torment or suffering. Or like I could actually have not like put in the necessary resources to ever escape from the inside. And then 5, no one is set up to naturally believe me, meaning like the way the simulation is coded is like I can't actually get anyone to ever believe me because they're not programmed to ever actually believe me, as per my own rules of my own simulation, right? And then 6, the caveat is government, police departments, institutions all still exist. Like this does not make them not exist, because like I could have simulated that too, because like in my past when they still existed, like that type of thing. Or if they still exist in the future and I'm just like in my room just simulating this version of myself, right? You understand? Like this does not, that's why I put 6 separate, but it's still a consideration. And then it's like, okay, once you consider that, you're like, wow, I really have the ability to do whatever, but I can't do whatever. Like I can't fly. Like obviously every single time I jump, I fall back down, because it's like, well, if you simulate the past, you by default have to simulate the being's ability to move throughout the past at all. Meaning that, I still think that gravity is kind of an illusion, but it's a helpful illusion. Just like how mirrors and reflections are helpful. Like I said, if you actually traveled all those light years away and you found an exact version of yourself walking up to yourself, you'd be like, so due to this helpful illusion of a mirror, how monkeys and primates use mirrors to basically, alter their appearance, I guess. Like scratch themselves if they see something on their arm or their face or their nose, because they're like, finally a reflection. I can see myself and make sure I look good, because they have social awareness, right? Because they're sentient. Well, that's how I define it. So, and that's why it's like, this is kind of actually a great hypothetical thought experiment, at least for myself, because it's like, okay, well then I can easily define sentience, right? As the ability to at least know of your environment that you're moving in, even if it is the past, right? So, it's like, wow, at least I can't ever violate gravity. And gravity seems to be an illusion tied to distance, right? And I'm like, okay, am I lying or not, right? You know, when I talk about how far away that pond is, it's like, am I lying when the video picks up how far away that sound was, right? Or am I altering the video in between? You can't tell. All you can tell is that I'm telling the truth, unless I wanted to lie and make myself fly later. And you know, but right now I'm telling the truth from my perspective. Yeah, distance, velocity, and gravity seem to be tied, and I think it's kind of all of an illusionary effect, with velocity and distance actually having a big portion in the other half that is the illusion of gravity, if that makes sense. Like Einstein's special relativity versus general relativity, right? Because I could say, well, due to my DNA, that looks like there's no blue Rayleigh's emitter effect. It's not light blue. The exposure, it's actually green, guys. And it's like, well, no, it looks blue to me. So either some people this is green. This is kind of like a yellowish, but I can see how it adopts a new color, so I'm not even going to comment on it due to the luminosity. So, counter arguments before I run out of recording time, because apparently I'm about to run out. Intelligent design, right? Formal confirmation, emergent free will, doesn't matter. So I'm just going to go through these real quick. Intelligent design, it's like, okay, why do I feel pains? Why do I feel sadness? Why do I, quote unquote, intelligent design? That's why I conceived the idea of the accidental God in the first place, and saying, well, if I was so perfect, then I would simulate, or even if I was so imperfect, why would I simulate not a bare bones version of myself, in the respect that, you know, it would actually take more effort to simulate a non-stick person with I could easily have negative mass, but it's like, no, I feel like I have mass inside of me, because if nothing else, I have sensors on the tips, right, of my skin, and when I penetrate my skin, it's like I see blood running in. So why would you simulate all that? None of that's necessary, right? So, quote unquote, intelligent design destroys the entire I made the simulation type thing, right? 2, formal confirmation. If I actually traveled to myself right now and it's like, yeah, I'm a dick to you, and then I just like traveled back and left, right? That would break that. But then it would be like, okay, well, who created you? And it's like, oh, I guess that's why I simulated myself, to figure out, you know? But that's very unlikely to happen. These counter arguments say you cannot disprove these, really. Therefore, this kind of stands shaky, right? This hypothesis stands shaky. So I make sure I always do this, so there's like wiggle room in my hypotheses. Okay, emergent free will, saying, does it matter? Like I said, it feels like I can't violate this medium, right? Therefore, does it ultimately matter if I accidentally